a ticket arrived in the mail, and it was a very important ticket because Tante Dvosha in America had sent it for Chaim. He would come, and then later he could bring the rest of the family. And this is a time of immigration for Jews that was very critical because things were heating up in Poland. It was a difficult life. They weren't, it was impossible to do all the things that they had a right to do, the shtetl life. Well, Monastyrzhiska was a town more than a shtetl, but nevertheless, their relatives were in shtetls and they felt the constriction of life, the government in Poland was placing on people. And it was getting hard to make a living if you were Jewish. So they came, many Jews came to America as a result of that whole cycle. And one of the things that I never understand is, did they ask Tante Dvosha for this ticket, or was it arriving because Tante Dvosha thought that's a way out for them? And all I know is the conversation that I was told was that there was this big debate that was going on behind my mother. My mother didn't ask for it. It was just going on. And the debate was, should Chaim really have the ticket? Because, said her mother, Malka needs to have the ability to write. She needs to have the ability to be able to express herself as a young woman. She's a flower, she's growing. She needs to have the freedom to be herself. And I'm imagining the scene, the mother and the daughter talking about this. And knowing my mother, she probably turned red and almost was holding her breath as she was sitting there literally with bated breath, not believing what she was hearing, that the mother would deny the father the ticket so she could go to America and write. There was great joy in her heart when she realized that Mama was serious and that Mama really cared about her. Her sweet oldest child, she was letting her go so she could be herself. My mother never forgot that experience. It was a very important experience in her life, as was even the ride across the Atlantic, which she describes in Durch kindische Augen. And she was on a boat that they were all in steerage, and there's many stories, but the story that applies to her writing was she often used to go on the top deck and sit against the railing of the boat, and she'd pull out her notebook, and what else was she doing? She was writing poems. And she was sitting there writing and listening to the conversations of the first-class people, and nobody chased her out. They let her sit up there. And she began to realize that there was a lot of concern that when you get to the American shore, if you have something about you that could be denied, maybe, you were sick, or there was another matter that was subversive, they would send you back. So she began to shred her notebook because she was afraid that these poems would be blocked and she would have to go home. And a man on the boat, an older gentleman, was watching her do this and came over to her and said, "What are you doing? Are you feeding your poems to the fish?" And he talked her out of doing that. He said, "No, they're not going to lock you out. You will be able to go into New York. They will accept you there. Whatever poems you have, they're not subversive, they're poems." But of course, a woman was writing, so maybe that was subversive. That was sufficient, but not to this guy. And my mother believed him because she desperately wanted to believe that. And she continued writing until they reached New York. And she arrived with at least most of her notebooks intact.